Hey everybody, welcome to the Glasses Push. My name is Chuck, and today we are discussing the newest Michael Crichton novel, Dragon Teeth. So why should you care? Well, Michael Crichton, for several decades, seemed to dominate the literary and cinematic world. Any of his books seem to go on to become a successful motion picture, and he was heavily involved in TV. You can see it in everything from ER to Westworld, the Jurassic Park, Jurassic World franchise, Sphere, Congo, Timeline, Eaters of the Dead / 13th Warrior. The list goes on. He has an incredible oeuvre. I'm not sure if that's how you say it in French. I did the accent, and I think it made it worse. You can be the judge. He was incredibly influential, and he has a special place in my heart. Back in 4th grade, Jurassic Park was the first real adult-type novel that I had read, and up until high school and beyond, I was always an avid reader of his, and I believe his books always became movies because they have such a cinematic quality to them. He just has had a very innate sense of plotting and how to propel action and, really hook you. But that brings us to Dragon Teeth, and another reason you should care is this is a pretty controversial release. This is his third posthumous novel that was released by his wife Sherry and his estate, and so there's always a question of, if it wasn't released during his lifetime, why? And would it have lived up to his expectations? I can only speak for mine, so let's jump right into it. What did I think? I really wanted to like this book, and all the marketing around it is very intriguing, with a very prominent dinosaur skull. You immediately think Jurassic Park and think that there may be more to this adventure. Very quickly, I was corrected on this when I started listening. When it got into, okay, this is essentially a story about warring paleontologists and an 18-year-old that gets wrapped up in this journey to discover dinosaur bones in the Old West. That's the basic premise, and it sticks to it. The writing is fairly standard Crichton. It's nothing showy. We don't really have the amount of technical details that are normally found in a Crichton novel. There are little historical bits kind of weaved into it, but it's less elegant than his other novels, whereas in something, I keep going back to Jurassic Park, but a lot of the technology and the science was very heavily rooted into the plot, and in Dragon Teeth, it almost feels like there is the story that he wants to tell, and then there was the research he was doing on the story, and there's very little overlap or connectivity. About every 3 chapters, you'll just get this heavy section where all it's talking about is the history of a particular area, and it has little to nothing to do with the characters, and doesn't really do anything to enhance your understanding or appreciation of the setting. So very much in that regard, that gave me my first sense that this was not a completed work, because the research elements and the story are practically divorced from each other. However, then there are elements where history and fiction very much combine when you get introduced to famous settings and historical figures. There is a large swath of the book that takes place in Deadwood, and it feels it feels clunky. You're forcing historical fiction when it's not necessary, doesn't really move the story forward. That said, the plot always moves briskly. You're never stuck in one place for long, which is nice for the momentum of the story. However, what does suffer is character development. You never really get a sense of who any of these characters are. Everyone seems, pretty one or two dimensional. I'm not really sure how that works. I mean, we're all three-dimensional people, so yeah, two or one-dimensional. Well, you can't see them, so I don't know. They're lacking in dimension or depth. We'll just say that. There's a couple love interests throughout the story, and it feels very ham-fisted and or juvenile. Which, granted, the protagonist is an 18-year-old boy. However, it all feels too easy and too convenient. And then some various elements that are used throughout the writing, where there will be foreshadowing to a later event, oftentimes ends up killing any tension or surprise instead of building it. It really has a way of kind of diffusing the story and taking you out of it. Often this element can, when it's executed properly, implore kind of a sense of dread, but in this case it really just kind of takes you out of the world, honestly. And it gives away too much, or you already know what's going to happen in the future based on a previous bit of foreshadowing. So the tension is often non-existent. Characters' motivations are hinted at, or you'll be directly told, oh, and I was very surprised as to what this person did next and completely changed my opinion of him. But then you never really get anything that makes you feel like, oh wow, that really was a betrayal or a change in the dynamic between two characters. And honestly, the whole central conflict, as well as what kind of propels the story and creates one of the first elements of intrigue, doesn't really make sense, reeks very much of Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina is a fine device in certain cases, but in this it was absolutely pointless, not rewarding, and in fact very confusing, because a character does an act which really smacks of betrayal, and then later, when certain characters are reunited, nothing comes of this. So the whole time you think, oh wow, that was important, so this is going to be huge when these characters meet again. No, it's not even mentioned. These plot threads are introduced as quickly as they're abandoned. The story just didn't seem fleshed out. It's like all the ideas were there, but there was no time to finesse them into something, to address the troublesome points, or to put a little more thought into things. What would I rate it? Again, I really wanted to like this thing, and especially because of the place that Michael Crichton has in my heart, and the fact that this is a posthumous release, it's so difficult to rate this without feeling like I'm desecrating his legacy or something, or even questioning the motives of his family or his estate, which I'm not doing. But just for me, it felt like an imperfect novel, a very imperfect novel. It felt unfinished, and everything was clunky. This book wasn't a failure, but it was well within D territory, and in fact, you know what, I'm putting it right on the cusp of being a failure, F grade. This is a 60 out of 100. There are just so many problems. The characters aren't very interesting. The prose is not flowery and kind of lacks anything where you could give extra points to that. The best that can be said is that the action does constantly move forward, so it isn't a dry read, but it is a constantly frustrating one where anything you could imagine or expect is often better than what was actually put on the page or the audio file if you're listening. I was listening. Well, so those are my thoughts, but have you read this book? Are you interested in reading it? What do you think about releasing books after an author's death? Are these way too many questions to ask? Has anyone ever answered any of these questions in my comment section ever? Well, no. But does that deter me? Also, no. I believe the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. So, call me crazy. Also, this coffee cup is empty. Glasses push out.